Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. A violent splintering tore through the quiet, yanking me from sleep's embrace. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum in the sudden profound stillness. I lay rigid, breath held captive, straining against the oppressive dark. Then, again, a sound like ice cracking underfoot. The unmistakable glacial scrape of boots grinding over shattered panes somewhere below. Alone. I lived utterly alone. No one else belonged within these walls. Panic flared, cold and sharp, as my fingers scrabbled blindly across the nightstand for the smooth reassurance of my phone. Call emergency services? The impulse warred with a paralyzing wave of doubt. What if it was nothing? Old Man Hemlock's ginger tomcat, perhaps. A repeat offender in nocturnal trespassing. The potential absurdity, the sheepish explanation to dispatch. It held me frozen. A deep breath, tasting of dust and fear. I swung my legs out, the shock of cold floorboards biting at my bare feet. A plank groaned under my weight, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the charged silence. I flinched. If an unwelcome presence lurked below, my location was now starkly advertised. My hand closed around the familiar weight of the ashwood bat leaning against the dresser, a relic of university leagues. Its presence a testament to unpacked boxes and lingering nostalgia. Tonight, that negligence felt like providence. Clutching the bat, its grain a rough comfort, I moved with excruciating slowness toward the bedroom door. The house seemed to hold its breath with me. No further sounds drifted up from the lower level. Had the initial chaos been a figment, a dream's violent echo? I eased the door open, wincing as hinges whispered their betrayal into the hall. Beyond lay an ink-black void, the darkness tangible, pressing close. My phone again, its screen casting a weak, spectral glow, carving a fragile path ahead. Reaching the stairwell's precipice, another floorboard creaked, but not mine. This sound emanated distinctly from the living room, a deliberate settling of weight. My own breath hitched, trapped. Someone was unquestionably down there. Retreat, a voice screamed inside my head. Bolt the door, dial the number. Yet a contrary current pulled me onward, a strange alloy of indignation and morbid curiosity. This was my sanctuary. I would not be reduced to a trembling prisoner in my own home. Step by deliberate step, I descended into the unknown. Each tread seemed amplified, the old wood sighing, complaining under my cautious weight. The bat stayed high, poised, muscles coiled tight. At the bottom, the scene resolved. A jagged gash of moonlight, stark and silver, sliced across the living room carpet, originating from the violated window. Glass shards glittered like malevolent frost, and there, framed against this pale luminescence, stood a shape. A figure. My pulse roared in my ears, a deafening surge I felt certain must betray me. They faced away, engrossed, it seemed, by the spines of books on my shelves. I opened my mouth to roar, to command, to expel this violation, but only a pathetic, strangled gasp escaped my throat. The figure spun, a blur of motion. I registered wide, startled eyes in a pale face just as primal instinct detonated. With a surge of pure, unthinking force, I swung the bat. A hideous, dull thud reverberated through the room, followed by a sharp cry of pain. The intruder crumpled, a dark heap clutching their head. Adrenaline ignited my veins. My trembling hand slapped against the wall, finding the switch. Warm, ordinary light flooded the space, banishing the shadows, revealing the aftermath. It was a woman, young, perhaps my own age, clad entirely in black. A backpack lay beside her collapsed form. Crimson bloomed starkly against her forehead where the wood had struck. "Wait!" she choked out, voice thin and strained with agony. "Please, I can explain." I stood anchored to the spot, the bat still defensively raised, my reality tilting violently. This wasn't the script. Burglars fled, didn't they? They didn't collapse and plead for dialogue. "You have 60 seconds, I heard myself say, the steadiness in my tone a baffling counterpoint to the tremor in my hands, before I contact the authorities. The woman pushed herself into a sitting position, a visible wince tightening her features. "My name is Lyra," she managed. "I didn't come here to steal anything. I came because you're in profound danger." A harsh bark of laughter escaped me, devoid of humor. "I'm in danger. You smashed your way into my house." Lyra shook her head, a movement instantly regretted judging by her grimace. "Not danger from me, from them, the ones observing you." An icy tendril traced its way down my spine. "What are you talking about?" "Have you experienced irregularities?" Lyra pressed, her gaze intense, cutting through the pain clouding her eyes. "Objects not where you left them, that distinct prickle on your skin when you know you're alone, the feeling of unseen eyes." Denial clawed at my throat. I wanted to dismiss her as delusional, but treacherous memories surfaced unbidden. The ceramic mug, undeniably left on the kitchen counter, discovered later nestled in the sink basin. The persistent crawl of awareness on my nape during walks home. Fleeting shadows dancing at the edge of sight. "How could you know that?" The question emerged as barely a whisper. Lyra's expression was bleak. "Because I've lived it. They're known as the Watchers. They select, they scrutinize, they catalog, and when their study is complete, they collect." "Collect? Collect where?" She offered a slight, pained shrug. "No one returns to tell. The taken are simply gone." My legs gave way, depositing me heavily onto the sofa cushions. This was madness, utterly impossible, yet a terrifying resonance hummed beneath the surface of her words, a chilling echo of my own unspoken anxieties. "Why me?" I breathed. "Why would they watch me?" "Their criteria are opaque," Lyra conceded. "Seemingly random, but once you register on their awareness, escaping their focus is improbable, not without intervention." My gaze sharpened. "Is that your purpose here? Intervention?" She nodded, a small, determined motion. "I belong to a network. We identify those under observation. We facilitate extraction, relocation to secure coordinates before the Watchers make their move." My thoughts spun, a chaotic vortex. This felt too vast, too conspiratorial for the mundane confines of my living room. Part of me desperately clung to the possibility of an elaborate ruse, a waking nightmare. But the solid weight of the bat, the lingering copper tang of adrenaline, they screamed reality. I require evidence, I stammered. I can't just accept this. Lyra nodded again, as if anticipating the demand. With slow, deliberate movements that spoke of her injury, she reached for the backpack beside her. I instinctively tightened my grip on the bat, muscles tensing, but she merely retrieved a compact device, resembling a hybrid of a smartphone and some kind of scanner. This reads their surveillance signatures, she explained, her voice low. Observe. She thumbed a control. The device emitted a soft electronic hum. Carefully, she swept it across the room. Silence stretched. Then, as the beam passed over my television set, a shrill, piercing beep sliced through the air. There, Lyra stated, her tone grim. Embedded within your television. It serves a dual purpose, I'm afraid. Horror washed over me as I stared at the familiar black screen. That set had occupied the corner for years. The notion it had been a silent electronic spy. There will be more, Lyra continued, her voice flat. Your phone, your laptop, likely your vehicle. Their methods are exhaustive. Nausea churned in my stomach. My life, my private moments, potentially cataloged, observed. For how long? What do we do? The question trembled on my lips. We vacate, Lyra said with stark simplicity. Immediately, pack essentials only, a single bag. Material possessions are irrelevant where we're headed. Hesitation gripped me. How can I be certain I can trust you? This could be an incredibly elaborate deception. Lyra's eyes, despite the pain, held a flicker of something akin to empathy. You can't be certain, but consider the alternative. Remain here, aware now, waiting for them to close in. With me, there exists a possibility, however slim. She was right. The chilling logic resonated. True or false staying felt impossible now, the seed of paranoia firmly planted. All right, I conceded, drawing a steadying breath. Allow me 5 minutes. Upstairs, throwing clothes and toiletries haphazardly into a duffel bag felt surreal, detached. My existence had fractured and reformed in less than an hour. This morning, a work presentation loomed as my chief anxiety. Now I was poised to abandon everything, fleeing with an injured stranger from an invisible, perhaps imaginary, enemy. Yet, zipping the bag closed, casting a final glance around the familiar confines of my bedroom, a strange certainty settled. If Lyra spoke truth and a cold dread insisted she did, then remaining was tantamount to surrender. Returning downstairs, bag clutched tight, I found Lyra on her feet, leaning heavily against the wall for support. Prepared? She asked. I nodded, speech failing me. As we slipped out through the door, leaving the broken window gaping behind us, into the cool embrace of the night, I risked one backward look at the house. It felt alien already, a relic of a life that might never have been truly mine. For all I knew, it was farewell forever. Where are we headed? I asked, our footsteps hurrying along the deserted pavement. Lyra's profile, etched against the sparse streetlights, was grim but resolute. Somewhere secure, somewhere off their grid. As we melted into the deeper shadows, the conviction hardened. My former life had just ended. Whatever awaited down this unknown path, whether Lyra's narrative held fast or unraveled into delusion, there was no retracing my steps. The Watchers, real or not, would need a new subject for their scrutiny. My time as passive audience was over. It was time, perhaps, to finally become the narrative's driving force. Silence woke me, absolute and profound, at 3:17 a.m. Not the percussive violence from the floor above. That had merely been the prelude. It was the vacuum that followed, a stillness so complete it pressed against my eardrums, humming with absence. I lay suspended in the guest bed, breath caught shallow in my throat, straining against the utter lack of sound. No sigh of wind through ancient eaves, no arthritic groan from the old house, no whisper of distant traffic, just silence, vast and ringing. This sprawling manor wasn't mine to be terrified in. Julian, bless his oblivious generosity, had offered his family's century-weathered estate outside the city sprawl for my work retreat. A quiet place, he'd called it, nestled within 5 acres of gnarled oaks and guarded by a rust-weeping iron fence forgotten by time. Yesterday's whirlwind tour had been brief. Kitchen here, bath there, this guest chamber your sanctuary. He'd murmured something about sticking to the ground floor, a detail lost as I absorbed the shadow-swallowing wainscoting and the ghosts of intricate patterns on threadbare carpets. Then, shattering the void, another crash, directly overhead. It resonated deep in the house's bones, followed immediately by the unmistakable, laborious scrape of something immense being dragged across bare wood. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I bolted upright, the sheets pooling around my waist, cold air striking the damp film of sweat on my t-shirt. "Hello?" My voice, a thin reed in the oppressive quiet. "Anyone there?" Only the dragging answered, slower now, methodical, heavy with intent. My phone, snatched from the nightstand, cast a stark cone of light. It sliced through the room's Stygian gloom, illuminating an ornate, age-darkened dresser, velvet curtains thick as shrouds, the door slightly ajar. My bare feet met the shocking cold of the hardwood floor as I swung my legs out. The dragging ceased. Silence rushed back in, only to be punctured by footsteps. Deliberate, weighted. Each tread made the ceiling timbers above me creak in protest. They were moving away, angling toward the mansion's rear. I rose, knees trembling. Logic scrabbled for purchase, settling foundations, an errant nocturnal creature. But foundations don't settle with such rhythmic cadence, and no raccoon hauls furniture. Phone held before me like a talisman. I edged into the hallway. The beam painted a narrow swathe across faded damask wallpaper and a procession of closed doors. Overhead, the footfalls continued, each one a physical jolt. "Julian!" I tried again, louder, forcing bravado into the tremor. If this is some elaborate prank, it's lost its charm. The steps halted. Again, that suffocating silence descended. Then the distinct groan of a door swinging open somewhere upstairs, followed by renewed footsteps. These angled differently, converging on the grand staircase looming at the corridor's end. Every instinct screamed flight, keys, car, escape. Yet a morbid magnetism, A blend of primal fear and reckless curiosity pulled me forward. The stairs ascended into blackness, swallowing the phone's beam. My first step elicited a loud creak. I froze, listening. Above, stillness reigned. Another step, then another, my free hand strangling the banister, knuckles white islands in the gloom. The wood, polished smooth by generations of passage, felt unnervingly slick. Halfway up, a distant door slammed shut with violent finality. My heart lunged, a frantic captive against my ribs. I froze again. Cold sweat traced paths down my spine, plastering my shirt to my skin. The air here was colder, thick with a cloying odor, musty, damp, like stacks of sodden newsprint abandoned to molder. Reaching the landing, I swept the light across the second floor. More closed doors, their brass knobs glinting like watchful eyes. All shut tight, except one. The third door on the right stood open, a dark maw in the hallway. And something about it felt fundamentally wrong. Closer now, the floorboards groaning their ancient complaints beneath my weight. The door possessed no handle, not merely missing. The dark wood flowed uninterrupted, seamless, as if a knob had never been conceived for this particular portal. I directed the beam inside. An empty cavern greeted me. No furniture, no art clinging to the walls, just naked hardwood floors scarred by time and wallpaper peeling away in ragged strips. Behind me, down the length of the hall, a distinct movement. Heavy footsteps, nearer now, imbued with purpose. I spun, the light beams slashing wildly. Louder they grew, yet the corridor remained empty, stretching into impenetrable darkness. I stumbled backward into the threshold of the doorless room, my shoulders hitting the frame. The footsteps reached the hall's end. In the trembling circle of light, a shape detached itself from the shadows, a coagulation of the deeper dark slithering along the wall. Then the steps resumed, moving away, receding into the gloom. My legs buckled. I slid down the wall, landing hard on the unforgiving floor. The phone slipped from my nerveless grasp, clattering, its beams spinning crazily before settling, and in its steady glare, I saw them. Footprints, etched clearly in the thick dust, leading from the doorframe toward the room's desolate center. Not my prints. These were larger, far larger, and disturbingly elongated, impressed deeply, as if their maker bore an immense burden. Snatching the phone, I scrambled upright. The footsteps had ceased again, replaced by a new horror, a low, wet respiration, a thick, submerged gurgle, like drowning lungs fighting for air. It seemed to emanate from somewhere directly above. I fled. Down the hall, stumbling, scrambling down the stairs 2, 3 at a time, nearly pitching forward twice. Behind me, the footsteps erupted anew, faster now, matching my frantic pace. I hit the ground floor at a dead run, not pausing until I reached the dubious safety of the guest room. The door slammed shut. I fumbled with the old-fashioned lock, fingers clumsy with terror. Backing away, I braced myself, waiting for the pursuit to reach the door. Nothing. Only silence pressing in again, thick and suffocating. The remainder of the night was a vigil. Perched on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in one hand, car keys biting into the palm of the other, I stared unblinking at the door. Only when the first gray tendrils of dawn probed the edges of the heavy curtains did I dare move. Laptop, overnight bag, snatched, out, gone. I called Julian from the car, the steering wheel slippery in my trembling hands. Voicemail. An hour later, same result. Again that afternoon. He finally returned the call that evening, his voice infuriatingly normal. Hey, apologies, swamped with meetings. Everything all right? All right? Julian, no. What in God's name is happening in that house? Who else was there? What are you talking about? No one. Keys are with you. What went on? I recounted the night's terrors. The crashes, the dragging, the relentless footsteps, the handleless door gaping open, a long, heavy pause stretched across the line. Which room? He asked finally, his voice altered, strained. Upstairs, third on the right, the one without a doorknob. Another silence, longer this time. Impossible, he said, the word drawn out, thin. That room's been sealed since I was a boy. Decades. Nobody could open it. The handle broke off years ago. The door warped shut. Are you certain? Julian, I was in it. The door was wide open. Stay put, he commanded, urgency sharpening his tone. I'm heading back. Don't go near the property until I arrive. 3 hours later, he sat at my small kitchen table, looking pale and deeply unsettled. Coffee brewed, untouched, between us. He wordlessly produced his phone, displaying a photograph. This, the room. It showed the same barren space, but the door was unequivocally closed, the wood smooth and uninterrupted where a handle should have been. That's it, I confirmed, but it was open. I stood right inside. Julian raked a hand through his hair, agitation radiating from him. My great-uncle Alistair, he began, his voice low. That was his room. He vanished in 1937, vanished from inside that room. They found it locked from within, no handle, no way in or out. Had to break the door down eventually. Empty, no trace, no clue. They boarded it up again. Far as anyone knows, it hasn't been opened since. He swiped to another photo, sepia-toned and haunting. A tall, gaunt man stood before the mansion. His face was indistinct, blurred by time, but his posture was unnervingly stiff, puppet-like, as if suspended by unseen wires. Last known picture, Julian murmured. Taken the day before he disappeared. The police report mentioned something peculiar. Footprints in the dust inside the sealed room, leading from the door to the center. Too large for a man, they said, and too deep, like whatever made them carried something substantial. My coffee mug slipped from numb fingers, shattering on the linoleum. Neither of us moved. Why didn't you breathe a word of this? I demanded, my voice shaking. Honestly, would you have stayed? Besides, it's folklore now, sealed for nearly 90 years. I never imagined. He trailed off, gaze fixed on the spectral figure in the photograph. My grandmother, she'd talk sometimes after a few drinks. Said the night before Alistair vanished, she heard noises, crashes, footsteps from his room. She went to check, but the door was locked tight. No handle even then. She heard steps inside, moving away from the door. Then, nothing. I looked again at the old photograph. Something else nagged at me, a subtle wrongness. The man's feet. They didn't seem to rest fully on the ground. What was he doing before? Julian hesitated. Research, obsessed with it. Old texts, esoteric lore, occult diagrams. His journals were found later, mostly indecipherable. Symbols, complex calculations. But one entry haunted my grandmother. The very last one, penned the day he disappeared. It just said, they utilize the apertures now, all of them. even those unseen. A heavy silence settled between us. Finally, Julian pushed himself up. "I'm selling it," he declared flatly. "Should have done it after my parents passed. Couldn't bring myself to. Always thought maybe answers were still hidden there." "And the room?" I asked quietly. "Sealing it. Properly this time. Concrete, steel, whatever it takes. That door stays shut." But I knew better, because even now, closing my eyes conjures the image of those alien footprints in the dust, leading away into nothing. I hear the inexorable tread receding down the hall. I feel the unnatural chill emanating from that doorless void. Sometimes late at night, a compulsion drives me to check the handles on my own apartment doors, a futile reassurance against the impossible. Some entrances, I now understand, require no handles. Some intrusions need no doors at all. Last night, at 3:17 a.m., I heard them again. Heavy footsteps in the hallway just outside my bedroom. I didn't investigate. I lay rigid, listening as they passed, faded, and were consumed by silence. Will they return? Will they find another aperture, another unseen door? Alistair's final words echo, even those unseen. How many such doors exist, waiting? How many sealed rooms harbor secrets better left undisturbed? How many phantom footsteps traverse empty corridors in the dead of night, retreating into darkness? Sleep offers little refuge. The conviction persists. Something latched onto me in that house. Something patient. Something that bypasses locks and waits for a moment of unguardedness. A blink too long, but mostly it's the footprints. Because when Julian, weeks later, forwarded the digital copies of the photos, I saw what neither of us had noticed in our initial shock. In the image of the barren room Alistair vanished from, the one Julian took after my flight, there were indeed footprints in the thick dust. But they weren't leading from the door to the center. They were leading from the center to the door, and they looked horrifyingly fresh. Something about disposing of the problem snagged my attention, slicing through the usual late-night hum of Leo's Starlight Diner. The ordinariness of my shift fractured right then, though the true abyss yawning before me remained unseen. It was that strange seam between Tuesday night and Wednesday dawn, the dead hours when the city exhaled, leaving behind only the necessary and the nocturnal. 6 months I'd poured coffee and wiped counters on the graveyard watch at Leo's, witnessing the predictable parade, soused souls seeking greasy absolution, road-weary truckers chasing caffeine jolts potent enough to peel chrome, teenagers buzzing on illicit freedom. But the pair who slid into a booth at 2:37 a.m., that time blinking neon red on the wall clock, were carved from different stone. Their alertness was a discordant note in the pre-dawn quiet, a tightly wound focus that didn't belong. One, Silas, was all sharp angles and restless eyes beneath cropped, severe hair. The other, Reese, built like a concrete bollard, hands resting on the table like dormant threats. They chose the darkest booth, a pocket of shadow swallowed by the diner's far corner. Notepad in hand, I approached. "Welcome to the Starlight. What can I bring you?" Silas offered a smile that was purely geometry, no warmth reaching those perpetually scanning eyes. "Just coffee, black," he requested. A nod. I turned, the weight of Reese's stare pressing between my shoulder blades. Something about their presence prickled the hairs on my neck. Pouring the dark brew near the humming machine, their voices were a low thrumming beneath the kitchen clatter. Fragments snagged in the air, sharp and ugly. Deal with it tonight. Thorn won't forgive another foul up. River swallows everything, nobody checks deep. My hand faltered, the carafe trembling, threatening a spill. Drawing a breath, forcing steadiness, I carried the steaming mugs over. As I set them down on the worn formica, Silas's words cut off abruptly. Silence dropped like a shroud. Both pairs of eyes locked onto me, stripping away the thin veneer of normalcy. A current of ice traced my spine. Had they sensed my eavesdropping? Anything else? The question emerged surprisingly level, a small victory of control. Reese offered a dismissive grunt, shaking his head. Silas held my gaze a beat longer, assessing before clipping out, "We're set." Retreating behind the counter's supposed safety, my pulse hammered against my ribs. Call the precinct. And say what? That hushed words in a late-night diner sounded sinister. They'd dismiss it before the phone was back in its cradle. I made busy work polishing the already gleaming chrome of the espresso machine, arranging napkins into perfect fans, anything to project oblivious industry. But every filament of my awareness strained towards their booth. Nearly an hour crawled by, measured in their low murmurs and my feigned indifference. Occasionally, a glance would flicker my way, and I'd dive deeper into the charade of restocking sugar or checking the filter basket. Finally, they rose. Silas paused by the register, tossing bills onto the counter that landed with undue weight. He turned, his eyes like chips of obsidian in the fluorescent light. "Have yourself a quiet night now," he murmured, voice deceptively mild. "And remember, the best waitresses have terrible memories." The implication froze the marrow in my bones. They knew I'd heard. I watched them fold into a nondescript black sedan parked under a sputtering street lamp. As its taillights vanished, I scrawled the license plate onto an order ticket, my fingers feeling like clumsy strangers, the pen shaking violently. The remaining hours bled together in a smear of anxiety. Every arriving customer, every clatter of dishes, sent jolts of fear through me. You half expected Silas and Reese to reappear, their purpose less ambiguous this time. When my replacement drifted in at 6, smelling of sunlight and normalcy, I was frayed to the point of unraveling. The police station beckoned, yet fear, cold and paralyzing, held me fast. What if their reach extended further than a dark sedan? In a town this size, connections snaked through everything, even badges. Home offered no sanctuary. Sleep was a shallow, nightmare-laced affair, punctuated by their faces, their fragmented whispers about the river. My phone's jarring ring finally pierced the fog. It was Jenna, my friend, embedded in the local newsroom. "Maya, flick on Channel 5. Now," she urged, her voice tight with an unusual urgency. "You need to see this." My fingers fumbled with the remote. The screen flared to life, a breaking news banner scrolling across the bottom. The headline punched the air from my lungs. "Prominent businessman Marcus Thorne found in river." The anchor spoke gravely of the discovery early that morning, the suspicious circumstances. Then Thorne's picture filled the screen. The boss whose displeasure Silas and Reese had feared. The overheard fragments coalesced into a horrifying certainty. I hadn't just overheard a cover-up. I'd overheard the aftermath of a murder, and the men responsible knew I held a piece of their secret. A sick day called in. My small apartment felt like a cage, its walls closing in as I paced. The police remained a terrifying gamble. My word against theirs, against men who disposed of problems like Marcus Thorne and Thorne's influence. Who knew how many pockets he'd lined? Night fell, thick and suffocating. Passivity felt like complicity, a silent consent. I had to move, find something concrete. Parking down the block, I approached Leo's Starlight like a ghost returning to its haunting ground. The diner buzzed with morbid curiosity, locals dissecting the Thorne news over coffee and pie. I slipped through the steam-filled back entrance, a nod to the oblivious night cook, and made for the cramped office. My heart thudded against my ribs. If proof existed, it was in Leo's safe. He stored the security camera feeds there. Empty. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by renewed tension. The combination, embarrassingly simple, clicked open. Inside, amidst stacks of bills and mundane paperwork, sat a small box of USB drives labeled with dates. Jackpot. Clutching the previous night's recording, I turned to leave just as footsteps echoed in the narrow hall. Panic flared. The supply closet, narrow and smelling sharply of bleach, offered the only refuge. I pulled the door almost shut, peering through the thin slat. Leo. My boss, Leo, smiling thinly, obsequiously at Silas. Cold dread washed over me, absolute and sickening. Appreciate the assistance, Leo, Silas purred, his voice like silk sliding over steel. Always useful, friends in the right places. Leo's chuckle was brittle, nervous. Sure thing, Silas. Happy to, facilitate, but that waitress. Handled. Silas cut him off, the word sharp as broken glass. She'll be taken care of. They moved off down the hall. I waited, counting heartbeats in the dark, before easing out of the closet. My mind reeled. Leo, involved, facilitating, and they were coming for me. My escape from the diner was a blur of adrenaline. The USB drive clutched tight. The drive home was a paranoid ordeal. Every headlight in the rearview mirror a potential threat. Back in the supposed safety of my apartment, the laptop screen glowed. Grainy footage flickered. Silas and Reese hunched in the booth, their hushed conference lost to the camera's limitations. Then, after they departed, Leo emerged from the back. He moved purposefully to their booth, scanned the area, bent, and retrieved something small from the floor. A glint of metal, dark-stained even in the low resolution. A knife. He pocketed it swiftly, glancing around before retreating towards the office. My breath caught. Undeniable proof, and betrayal, sharp and absolute. I sat frozen, staring at Leo's image on the screen. What now? The evidence was potent, but the risk. And Leo, the man I'd shared jokes with over burnt coffee. A sharp rap on my apartment door shattered the silence. Maya, it's Leo. Need a word. My heart threatened to batter its way out of my chest. His voice, usually so genial, now held a chilling undertone, scraped raw with false bonhomie. How? He must have seen me return to the diner. He knew. Frantic glances, The door was a death trap, the window the only other path, 3 stories down. Below, illuminated faintly by the streetlights, a dumpster overflowed with black refuse sacks. "Maya," Leo called again, closer now. "I know you were back at the diner tonight. Let's just talk this through. We can work something out." A key scraped in the lock, his master key for employee apartments. No time. A silent prayer, the window flung open, the cold night air rushing in. I took the leap into darkness. The impact jarred through me, pain flaring hot in my leg, but the trash bags cushioned the worst of the fall. I scrambled out, gasping, just as Leo's enraged shout echoed from the window above. "There! She's running! Stop her!" Clutching the USB drive, my only weapon, my only hope, the tiny vessel containing their doom and potentially my own, I ran. Ignoring the fire in my leg, I plunged into the labyrinth of darkened streets and alleys. My old life, the predictable shifts and quiet anxieties incinerated in an instant. Ahead, only shadows, the pounding pursuit, and the desperate need to survive. All for pouring coffee in the dead hours of the night. The groan of tortured hinges, a sound like stressed bone, announced our catastrophic error the instant the warped metal barrier yielded. A breath escaped the opening. Not mere stale air, but a miasma thick with rot and an indefinable ancient malice. Retreat was no longer an option. The miles behind us were immutable, our own insatiable curiosity the final lock clicking shut. My name is Elias. I never imagined a simple weekend escape into the Appalachians with friends would unravel into a persistent nightmare, a shadow stitched forever to my waking thoughts. We were 5, myself, Finn, my oldest friend, his partner Chloe, and Ronan and Maya, faces familiar from lecture halls and late-night study sessions. Months of anticipation had culminated in this trek, a promise of untamed wilderness beneath vast, indifferent skies. Initially, the expedition unfolded beautifully. The air held a perfect autumn crispness under a canvas of flawless blue. Laughter echoed through the trees as we navigated the trail, the panorama of forested peaks unfolding around us. It was Finn who broke the spell, his voice cutting through the easy camaraderie. "Elias, look at this." We'd strayed from the marked path, seeking a quicker route back to the ember glow of our intended campsite when we found it. We clustered around the aperture, a dark mouth half swallowed by grasping vegetation. Timbers, skeletal and decayed, framed the entrance. A rusted placard, barely legible, hinted at peril, yet an undeniable magnetism emanated from the void, a silent dare. "We shouldn't," Chloe murmured, her words voicing the tremor of apprehension we all shared. "It looks unstable." But Ronan, ever the first to leap, was already fumbling with his torch. "Where's the spirit? Just a quick look inside. What harm could it do?" I should have echoed Chloe's caution, insisted we respect the mountain's evident warning. Instead, seduced by the unknown, I heard myself agree. "Yeah, just a peek. How bad could it be?" Words destined to become a bitter epitaph. The opening proved tighter than anticipated, forcing us to slither through one by one. Ronan's torch beam sliced feebly into the oppressive gloom, revealing a tunnel plunging into absolute blackness. The air hung heavy, tasting of dust and damp earth, punctuated by the rhythmic drip of unseen water. "Incredible," Finn whispered, his voice strangely amplified in the confined space. "Think what might be down here." We pressed onward, deeper into the Earth's embrace, the initial thrill steadily eroding into a pervasive disquiet. The tunnel branched, twisted, descended, pulling us further into its subterranean labyrinth. I attempted to memorize our path, but the identical passages blurred into a disorienting maze. We were adrift in the dark. Then Ronan's light snagged on something. We froze, a collective intake of breath. It was skeletal, draped in the rotted vestiges of what might once have been miner's garb. But this wasn't some historical relic. The bones possessed a disturbing, polished cleanliness, as if scoured bare only recently. "We have to leave," Maya choked out, her voice vibrating with nascent panic. But as we turned, the sickening realization dawned. We couldn't recall the way back. Every corridor seemed a mirror image of the last in the unsteady illumination. "Okay, stay calm," I managed, striving for a steadiness I didn't feel. "We pick a way, stick together. We have to find the entrance eventually." Choosing a passage at random, we advanced. Yet with every footfall, the conviction grew that we were descending further, not escaping. The temperature dropped noticeably. Silence pressed in, broken only by our ragged breaths and the relentless, distant weeping of water. That's when the sound reached us, a low, guttural vibration that resonated deep in my bones, chilling my blood. It echoed from the darkness we'd just traversed. "What was that?" Chloe whispered, her fingers digging into Finn's arm. Before an answer could form, it came again, perceptibly nearer, and then caught flickering at the edge of our lights. Movement. Something utterly wrong. My first thought was a man, gaunt, perhaps injured. But as it shambled closer, the illusion shattered. Its form was emaciated, skin stretched like parchment over unnaturally elongated limbs. The face was a hollowed-out horror, sunken sockets harboring a faint internal luminescence, and a maw splitting into a rictus of needle-sharp teeth. We fled. Primal fear lent wings to our feet. We scrambled through the tunnels, directionless, caring only for distance from the thing scrabbling behind us. Its rasping snarls ricocheted off the stone, amplifying, closing in. We burst into a vast cavern, a momentary flicker of hope, an exit, extinguished as our light swept across the scene. Bones, a carpet of them, hundreds, perhaps thousands, strewn across the cavern floor. Not all were human. Some were warped, hideously malformed, suggesting anatomies unknown to the sunlit world. "Dear God," Maya whimpered, "what is this place?" There was no time to contemplate. The creature erupted into the cavern from the tunnel we'd just vacated, and it was not alone. More horrors spilled from other openings, their eyes pinpricks of hungry light in the gloom. "There," Finn yelled, pointing frantically towards a narrow fissure high up the opposite wall. "Maybe we can fit." It was the slimmest of chances. We sprinted towards it, the creature surging behind us, their fetid breath hot on our necks. Chloe went first, then Maya, wriggling through the tight gap. Ronan followed, but halfway through, his broader frame jammed. Raw terror flared in his eyes as he struggled futilely. "Go!" he roared at Finn and me, his voice cracking. "Get out! I'll slow them down." A protest died in my throat. There was no time. The creatures were almost upon him. Finn shoved me violently towards the fissure. I squeezed through, rock scraping skin raw. The absolute blackness beyond enveloped me, but not before I glimpsed Ronan turning, flashlight held like a useless ward, facing the oncoming tide of nightmare, his expression a mask of grim finality. We tumbled out into another tunnel, this one blessedly sloping upwards. Hope, fierce and desperate, surged. This had to lead out. We ran, lungs searing, propelled by the phantom sounds of pursuit, still echoing from the depths. Then, finally, mercifully, a glimmer, light ahead, a final agonized burst of speed, and we erupted from the mind's maw into the bruised colors of twilight. We didn't cease running until we collapsed amidst the familiar disarray of our campsite, chests heaving, air tearing at our throats. Only then did the full weight of the horror settle. Ronan was gone, consumed by that subterranean charnel house, and the terrifying question hung unspoken. Could those things follow us into the world above? We abandoned camp with frantic haste, leaving gear behind. The hike back to the car became a fugue state of terror and exhaustion. We drove straight to the nearest town, spilling our incoherent story to skeptical police officers whose expressions shifted from disbelief to concern for our sanity. A search party was organized, dutifully dispatched. They found nothing, no trace of Ronan, no sign of the mine entrance we described with trembling certainty. It was as if the mountain itself had sealed the wound, erasing our ordeal. In the ensuing days, weeks, we tried to rationalize. Shared delusion, hallucinogenic gases potent in the mine's stagnant air. But the denial felt hollow. Deep down, beneath the layers of shock, we knew. What we had witnessed, what had hunted us, was real, however impossible. We swore an oath of silence, a pact to bury the memory and attempt normalcy. Yet the nightmares clawed their way back each night. In mine, I stand perpetually in that cavern of bones, surrounded by glowing eyes, Ronan's last shout echoing eternally in the suffocating dark. I haven't set foot on a hiking trail since. The others, I suspect, maintain a similar distance from the wilderness. We drifted apart, the shared trauma a chasm rather than a bond, each wrestling the darkness in solitude. But sometimes in the dead quiet of night, a message will appear on my phone from Finn or Chloe or Maya, a single word, remember, and I know they too are awake, staring into the dark, forever haunted by what slumbers beneath the earth. What were those entities? An undiscovered species dwelling in eternal night? The grotesque outcome of some forgotten experiment? Or something infinitely worse, something fundamentally alien to our world? The answers remain locked away in that vanished mine. But this much is certain. There are recesses in this world that defy comprehension. Horrors lurking just beyond the periphery of the known. And sometimes, curiosity is a key that unlocks doors better left sealed. So, should your wanderings ever lead you to the threshold of some forsaken shaft piercing the mountainside, heed this warning born of terror. Turn away, keep walking, do not grant it even a backward glance. Whatever you do, resist the urge to look inside. You cannot fathom what awaits in that darkness, perpetually starved, endlessly patient for its next visitor. As for me, I'll keep to the worn paths now, forever glancing over my shoulder, forever plagued by the thought that one day those creatures might find their way to the surface. And if they do, may whatever gods exist have mercy on us all. My devotion to routine is absolute, a liturgy performed daily. So the discordant note, my cherished cerulean mug, adrift on the wrong side of the basin, struck me not merely as odd, but as a sacrilege against the morning. Forgetfulness, I reasoned, a temporary lapse in the familiar cadence. But when the ordered strata of my bookshelf underwent a clandestine reshuffling in the night, a deeper disquiet took root. Something or someone was subtly rewriting the narrative of my sanctuary, and the edits were visible only to me. It began as whispers barely audible against the hum of normalcy. My existence is built on predictable placements, anchors in the day. The coffee mug, sentinel on the sink's right flank, awaiting its ritualistic filling, finding it transposed that first bleary Tuesday was a momentary cognitive dissonance. Had I, in some unremembered moment, shifted its position? Implausible, yet I dismissed it, letting the day wash over the anomaly. But the whispers grew bolder. Trifles followed, echoes of displacement. A tapestry cushion on the divan rotated precisely 45 degrees from its usual bearing, my keys migrating from their designated brass hook to another. The potted fern near the window nudged a fraction of an inch towards the pane. These were tiny heresies against the established order, noticeable only to the acolyte of the habitual. At first, the chilling thought arose. Was my own mind the unreliable narrator? I began documenting my space with the cold eye of a lens before departing each day, comparing the captured stillness with the evening's reality. The alterations were minute, almost negligible, yet utterly undeniable. An unseen presence inhabited my space, touching, adjusting, yet never pilfering. New tumblers clicked into place in the locks. A hidden lens nestled within faux foliage became my silent sentinel. Fine dust, like fallen snow, kissed the floorboards, awaiting a phantom tread. Yet dawn revealed pristine surfaces, empty recordings, and the quiet, irrefutable evidence of rearrangement. The true tremor of dread arrived with the library. My meticulously curated shelves, ordered by sensibility and surname, now blazed in a chromatic riot, a spectrum utterly alien to my logic, an aesthetic perhaps, but not mine. The careful architecture I'd constructed over hours, dismantled and rebuilt according to an unknown principle. This wasn't accident, this was orchestration. The authorities listened with polite skepticism. No breached entry points, no inventory missing, no tangible proof of trespass. They offered diagnoses, somnambulism, stress-induced memory lacunae. A referral to a psychiatrist was gently suggested, but a certainty resonated within me, sharp and clear. I was not unraveling. I took to sleeping on the divan, facing the room's expanse, a vigil against the unknown. 3 nights yielded nothing but strained silence. On the 4th, sleep, a shallow, wary thing, shattered. A susurrus, the slide of paper against wood. My gaze shot open, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The room lay steeped in shadow, yet illuminated faintly by the amber glow of distant street lamps. I saw it. There, silhouetted against the streetlight's faint intrusion, stood an impossible silhouette by the bookshelf. Tall, yes, but unnervingly slender, its form seeming to ripple, less substance than condensed shadow. It moved with a dancer's unsettling grace, aligning spines. A scream clawed at my throat, stillborn. Immobility claimed me, a chilling paralysis born of terror or some other unseen constraint. When it turned, slow as drifting smoke, the space where features should reside was utterly void, a smooth, featureless plain. Consciousness mercifully fled. The next awareness was the insistent brightness of morning, the room empty, save for me, and the bookshelf, now meticulously ordered by descending height. The day passed in a fugue state, sanity frayed. Was it delusion born of sleepless dread? Yet the books stood rearranged, irrefutable proof. It had occurred. That night, my phone became my witness, its lens aimed into the expectant dark. I remained awake, eyes straining against the gloom. Around the deepest hour, 3 a.m., it materialized again, coalescing from the gloom like ink bleeding into water. It glided to my writing desk, its attention now on the precise geometry of pens and paperweights. Its movements, economical and fluid, held a terrifying beauty. I watched, transfixed by fear and a dawning, perverse fascination. When its silent work concluded, it turned that blankness toward my petrified form. A gaze I felt, though no eyes were present. Then it dissolved, receding into the very shadows that birthed it. Morning. Trembling hands retrieved the phone. The recording? An unbroken tableau of an empty, silent room, time-stamped through the night. Yet my desk was a study in perfect alignment, each object positioned with an almost mathematical exactitude. Work became an abstraction. Days blurred. Hours were consumed by frantic research. Spectral encounters, dimensional breaches, obscure neurological conditions. No theory encompassed the quiet, persistent strangeness. Hesitantly, I began a dialogue of sorts, leaving scrawled questions on parchment: identity, intent, provenance. Each morning, the notes remained, untouched by ink, yet transmuted, stacked with geometric precision or folded into intricate paper cranes and stars. Weeks bled into months. The nightly visitations became a rhythm, the fear slowly transmuting into a strange fascination. The entity never threatened, never took. It simply ordered, endlessly, meticulously. Patterns began to emerge in its work, a clear preference for symmetry, for equilibrium. I started conducting small experiments, deliberately introducing asymmetry, minor chaos. Always by dawn, order was restored. One night, wakefulness persisting, I spoke into the stillness as it arranged my gathered sea glass into a flawless logarithmic spiral. "It's quite lovely," I whispered. "Thank you." The figure froze. That featureless head tilted, a gesture of profound stillness. Then a slow, deliberate inclination, a nod. Communication, wordless but understood. From that point, the dynamic shifted. The entity seemed receptive. It would pause its meticulous adjustments if I spoke, tilting its head as if processing the sound. No reply ever came. No whisper broke the silence, yet I felt acknowledged. I graduated to offering challenges, intricate knot puzzles, logic grids, a scrambled polychrome cube. Dawn revealed solutions elegant and unforeseen. The dread had ebbed, replaced by an inquisitive, almost collegial curiosity. The nightly visits became anticipated events, points of wonder in the encroaching solitude. This burgeoning rapport, however, carved a canyon between me and the mundane world. How to articulate this nightly communion? Who could comprehend a roommate woven from shadow, obsessed with cosmic tidiness? Invitations went unanswered, calls unreturned. My existence contracted, focusing inward to these four walls and the silent orchestrator within them. My life found its axis in the anticipation of its arrival, the discovery of its latest subtle masterpiece. I acquired objects purely for the pleasure of seeing them integrated into its grand design. One night, vigilance replaced sleep. It manifested at its appointed hour, but instead of turning to its usual task, it faced me directly. A limb, long and fluid, extended, palm open in unmistakable invitation. My pulse became a frantic drum against my ribs. This was a divergence, a threshold, a breath held, then released. Compelled by a force deeper than reason, my own hand rose to meet it. The touch was paradox, cool, neither truly solid nor entirely ephemeral, like grasping solidified mist. Contact ignited transformation. The familiar room dissolved, its edges blurring as shadows deepened, swirling into liquid geometries. A gentle pressure drew me upright, drew me forward toward the room's most profound darkness. With each step, the tangible world receded, replaced by an immersive reality woven from dynamic patterns and shifting, intricate forms. Terror should have reigned, yet what bloomed was an overwhelming sense of homecoming. Comprehension dawned. This wasn't intrusion, but tutelage, a meticulous preparation schooling my senses to perceive the underlying architecture of existence. As we crossed the final veil, I felt my own form loosen, becoming pliant, my perception expanding exponentially. The patterns were suddenly clear, not just within the apartment's confines, but echoing through the cosmos. The fractal elegance of a fern, the quantum ballet, the vast, symmetrical sweep of nebulae. I turned to my guide, my silent teacher, and perceived it truly for the first time. Not absence, but presence. Pure mathematical form, sentient geometry, the living equation beneath reality. It inclined its head again, a gesture of welcome into the fold. And so, we ventured forth into that boundless dimension, partners in the grand enterprise of discovering and refining the inherent order, shaping chaos into beauty across the infinite tapestry. Occasionally, a flicker of the life relinquished drifts through my awareness. The scent of coffee, the weight of a book, the specific slant of sunlight through a familiar window. I wonder who walks those floors now, if they sense the subtle shifts in the quiet hours. A knowing settles within me, a serene certainty that elsewhere another shadow stirs, another silent tutor prepares to emerge, poised to reveal the exquisite hidden symmetry of all things, just as I now do, an architect of patterns in this realm beyond imagining. My name is Elias. I attend the university nestled in Havenwood, a town draped in the kind of profound stillness that clings to sequestered places, those sleepy college hamlets where the passage of time feels muted, uneventful. Or so I believed, before the currents of last semester dragged me into stranger depths. My dormitory neighbor, occupying the room adjacent, was an individual named Julian. We weren't confidants, merely cohabitants navigating the academic year, with a functional cordiality. He possessed a tranquil disposition, often lost within the pages of dense texts, though amenable to the occasional shared pint or late-night meal procured after draining lectures. An unremarkable arrangement, until Julian himself began to shed his familiarity, warping into something inscrutable. The transformation was insidious, a slow bleed rather than a sudden rupture, which likely explains my delayed perception. He cultivated solitude, sealing himself within his four walls for protracted hours. Initially, this seemed unremarkable. The specter of final examinations loomed, fraying nerves universally. Yet Julian transcended typical student stress, morphing from the easygoing companion I recognized into an absolute hermit. Communication dwindled to silence. His door remained perpetually closed. I attributed it to academic pressure, occasionally rapping my knuckles against the wood, proposing sustenance or diversion. Each attempt met only profound quiet. He must be immersed, I reasoned. Days dissolved into an unbroken hush from his side. Unease began to prickle. A glance inside during a rare moment the door stood ajar revealed chaos. Garments strewn like fallen leaves, books and papers adrift across the floorboards. A stark anomaly for Julian, whose space usually reflected meticulous order. A knot of concern tightened in my gut. Was something genuinely amiss? Then arrived a night stitched from inexplicable threads. The hour hovered near midnight's cusp. I lay supine in bed, courting slumber, but alien sounds emanated from Julian's room, persistent intrusions upon the quiet. A dragging friction, a shuffling weight, as if heavy furniture were being laboriously repositioned. Perhaps reorganization, I speculated, a desperate attempt to impose order on his burgeoning chaos. But the noises intensified, swelling beyond the plausible. I fought to disregard them, yet sleep remained elusive. Rising, I traversed the short distance to his door, knocking softly. "Julian!" Silence answered. I knocked again, firmer this time. "Hey, man! Everything all right?" Still, only stillness replied. Pressing my ear flat against the cool wood, I strained to decipher the interior, and then I perceived it, a voice distinctly not Julian's. It resonated with a low, gravelly timbre, uttering hushed words, a guttural whisper. My pulse leaped, a frantic drum against my ribs. Julian never entertained guests, not to my knowledge, and our rooms were single occupancy. No legitimate reason existed for another presence within. I recoiled, mind scrambling to reconcile the auditory evidence with reality. Should I call out again? Fetch assistance? My hands trembled, volition paralyzed by a sudden, chilling uncertainty. Drawing a ragged breath, I sought equilibrium. Retreating to my bed offered no solace. Sleep was now an impossibility. I lay rigid, gaze fixed on the unseen ceiling, ears straining. The shuffling resumed its rhythm, interwoven with that disquieting clandestine voice. My thoughts raced. Who occupied that room? And why the profound secrecy from Julian? Eventually the sounds ceased, replaced by a silence more unnerving than the preceding clamor. I remained awake, ensnared by fear. My own heartbeat a deafening roar in the confines of my skull. Oblivion must have claimed me eventually, for awareness returned with the pale light of morning. My eyes snapped open. I sat bolt upright, gaze immediately drawn to Julian's door. It stood slightly ajar, Hesitation warred with morbid curiosity. Curiosity won. I slipped from bed, approached his threshold, and peered within. The room was vacant, utterly clinically vacant. The bed linens were smooth, his clothing vanished, the scattered books and papers erased, as if his existence there had been merely imagined. I stumbled back, bewildered and thoroughly unnerved. This defied logic. The previous night, the room had been a disaster zone. I had heard him, or something, within its walls. Now, pristine emptiness reigned, and Julian was gone. Without delay, I sought out the resident advisor, recounting the night's peculiar events. She regarded me with an expression hovering between skepticism and pity, but promised to consult the housing administration regarding Julian's status. Later that day, she located me. Julian moved out this morning, she reported, a flicker of concern in her eyes despite her placid tone. Everything sorted. Comprehension eluded me. I had been present, awake for much of the night. How could an entire room be emptied and vacated without my notice? I pressed her. Had anyone witnessed his departure? Observed anything unusual? She offered only a non-committal shrug. Officially, his exit was voluntary and unremarkable, but the sounds I'd heard resonated, a dissonant chord against the official narrative. The ensuing days blurred. I attempted to dismiss the incident, to relegate it to the realm of sleep-deprived hallucination or an overactive imagination. Yet the sensation lingered, an unshakable disquiet. Julian's former room remained unoccupied, a void in the hallway, and each time I passed its closed door, a prickling awareness crawled up my spine, the distinct feeling of being scrutinized. Roughly a week later, the phenomenon recurred. Night had fallen, and I was preparing for bed when the familiar cadence reached my ears, the dragging shuffle, the sibilant whisper. Except this time, the source wasn't Julian's old room. It originated from the room directly adjacent to mine on the other side. I froze, listening intently. The sounds were identical, imbued with that same deep, unsettling resonance. Gooseflesh erupted across my skin. My heart hammered against my sternum. I eased into the corridor, scanning the dimly lit space, attempting to grasp the unfolding situation. The neighboring room belonged to a first-year student named Leo, a quiet youth, largely keeping to himself, though I recognized his face from brief encounters. I rapped lightly on his door, uttering his name. "Leo," my voice emerged as barely more than a breath. "You okay in there?" No answer came. I tested the doorknob. It was secured. Pressing my ear to the wood once more, I listened. The voice was undeniable, that low, susurrant murmur, as if someone stood beside him, confiding secrets in the dark. A cold dread coiled in my stomach. I retreated, adrift. What recourse did I have? Seeking help felt futile. The RA had already discounted my previous account. Yet this wasn't fantasy. I had heard it unequivocally. Something deeply wrong pulsed within the dormitory walls, something defying explanation. The following morning, I approached the RA again, detailing the nocturnal disturbance from Leo's room. Her expression hardened with annoyance. Leo was fine, she insisted. I was likely exaggerating, letting my nerves get the better of me. But certainty burned within me. Another night crawled by, sleep fractured and shallow. Each time my eyelids drifted shut, the auditory phantoms returned. The scuffing scrape, the insidious voice. And then, mirroring Julian's departure precisely, Leo vanished. One day his room stood empty, immaculate, scrubbed clean of any trace of his occupancy, the bed neatly made, belongings gone, and the RA met the news with the same baffling indifference, as if student disappearances were routine administrative matters. But this was far from routine. Two individuals, both exhibiting unsettling behavioral shifts, both vanishing overnight without explanation, and that voice, that deep, whispering echo threading through both events. The chilling conviction solidified. I was next. Nocturnal sounds became my constant companions, even in solitude. Phantom footsteps pacing the corridor, fleeting shadows flickering beneath my door. I kept the lights burning, the lock steadfastly engaged. Yet these measures felt laughably inadequate. The sensation of being watched intensified, a palpable presence lurking just beyond perception, waiting. Then, one night, I awoke abruptly to the unmistakable groan of my own door easing open. Terror seized me, stark and absolute. My hand, trembling uncontrollably, fumbled for my phone on the nightstand. I forced my gaze towards the doorway. No figure stood there, only an aperture into deeper darkness, a vaguely humanoid silhouette suggested by the absence of light. I was paralyzed, breath caught in my throat. Lying rigid, phone clutched like a talisman, I stared into the void. And then I heard it. A voice, low and resonant, breathing my name into the stillness. Elias. Thought dissolved. Instinct screamed. I scrambled, grabbing essentials, pulling on shoes with frantic haste. No destination, no backward glance, only flight. Down the stairwell I plunged, bursting from the building's suffocating embrace into the cool anonymity of the night. What became of Julian or Leo, what entity shared their final hours in those rooms, remains unknown to me. All I knew with unshakable certainty was that I could not remain. I abandoned Havenwood after that semester, transferring universities, seeking distance. I have not returned. Yet sometimes in the profound quiet of the late hours, the echo finds me. That same sibilant whisper, patiently calling my name. And I cannot help but wonder if it's still searching, still waiting. Thursday yielded to the encroaching night, depositing Arthur Finch, bone-weary and frayed, onto the doorstep of his new existence. He'd traded the city's clamor for the purported tranquility of Stillwater Creek, Oregon, a hamlet tucked away where stillness was said to reign. His refuge, a solitary two-story structure perched precariously at the town's frayed edge, flanked only by sentinel pines and a vast, sighing field behind. Stepping inside, the silence was palpable, less peace than a held breath. Shoes shed, bag dropped, he navigated the unfamiliar dimness toward the kitchen, sustenance the only thought potent enough to pierce his fatigue. He craved oblivion, the simple surrender of sleep. Yet, poised before the cold glow of the refrigerator, a dissonant chord struck within him, a subtle wrongness, a tremor beneath the surface of the mundane. He dismissed it, a phantom of exhaustion, a hastily assembled sandwich, a glass of water, consumed at the worn kitchen table, but the hush deepened, becoming not an absence of sound, but a presence, amplifying the refrigerator's low thrum, the metronomic beat of the wall clock, then superimposed, delicate as falling dust yet undeniably present, footfalls from the floor above. Arthur froze, every muscle taut, listening into the pregnant quiet. Faint, yes, almost imagined, yet distinct. An open window, perhaps? A draft stirring some forgotten object? Rationality offered flimsy shields. He rose, movement measured, stealthy, his pulse a frantic drum against his ribs. Toward the staircase he crept, straining his ears against the quiet. The steps had ceased, leaving behind only a residue of dread, the unshakable conviction of another presence. Absurd, he chided himself, taking a steadying breath. Houses settled, timbers groaned, yet gazing up the shadowed ascent, the cold returned, an icy finger tracing his spine, raising the hairs on his nape. One riser, protesting after another, he ascended, the creaks echoing in the stillness. His gaze swept the upper landing, anticipating a silhouette against the gloom. Nothing. Only the vacant corridor carved by the weak overhead bulb into stark planes of light and shadow. Bathroom, spare chamber, his own bedroom, each yielded only emptiness, precisely as he'd arranged it. Windows secured, portals locked. A ragged exhalation escaped him, laced with self-reproach. The profound quiet, surely, was breeding phantoms. Retreating downstairs, he summoned the television's artificial chatter, a bulwark against the encroaching unease. Paranoia, he insisted, the unfamiliarity of the place, the depth of its silence. Later, cocooned in bedsheets, he fought the insistent prickle of wrongness. Darkness pressed against his eyelids. He lay adrift on the house's nocturnal symphony of sighs and settling groans until sleep eventually claimed him. He surfaced abruptly, plunged back into awareness in the dead of night. What disturbance? The room was absolute black, the silence profound. He lay suspended, courting sleep's return, but then it returned. The whisper, soft tread. Closer now, just beyond his bedroom door. A cold fist clenched around his heart. Bolting upright, he held his breath, straining. The footfalls were unhurried, measured, a deliberate patrol back and forth in the unseen hallway. Trembling fingers fumbled for the phone on the nightstand, its screen casting a pale, ghostly light. Flashlight engaged. He slid from the bed, bare feet soundless on the floorboards, inching toward the door. He held the beam low, a trembling circle on the wood grain, and eased the door open a fraction. Empty. The beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating vacant space. Nothing, no trace. He ventured a few steps into the corridor, the light dancing nervously across walls and doorways, his senses screamingly alert. Another sweep of the upper rooms confirmed only profound stillness, the house a silent, empty vessel. Returning to the perceived sanctuary of his bed, his thoughts churned, a frantic attempt to rationalize, to dismiss it as frayed nerves. But sleep remained elusive, banished by hours spent listening, waiting. Each innocuous creak a fresh jolt to his racing heart. Daylight brought a fragile resolve. He plunged into the workday, branding the night's events as foolishness, mere acclamation anxiety. But returning that evening, the familiar disquiet settled over him like a shroud, the distinct, unnerving sensation of being observed. He moved through his routine, a forced march of normalcy, yet every pass by a window sent prickles across his skin, an instinctive certainty of eyes upon him from the gathering dusk. Quick glances revealed only the deserted yard, the deepening silhouette of the pines bordering the field. Nothing tangible. Later, preparing for bed, a flicker of movement at the edge of his vision, a deeper shadow against the night outside the window. Arthur whipped around, his heart leaping. There, A man, standing motionless in the yard, just past the spill of the porch light. Tall, dark-haired, his features obscured but his posture rigid, his gaze fixed unerringly on the window, on him. Arthur stood transfixed, a statue carved from ice, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Call the authorities? But the imperative to watch, to not break contact, was overwhelming. He waited for a sign, a shift, a breath, but the figure remained utterly still, a silent sentinel staring, no sound, no gesture. As Arthur took an involuntary step back, hand instinctively seeking his phone, he risked a glance away, then back. Gone. The yard lay vacant beneath the moon, disturbed only by the wind-whispering trees. The call was made, his voice tight with residual fear. Officers arrived, their beams cutting methodical paths across the lawn, the tree line. Their search yielded nothing. No disturbed earth, no footprints, no evidence of intrusion. A prank, they suggested gently. Some local youth testing the newcomer. But Arthur knew the image was seared into his mind. He had been there, watching. The ensuing days were taut wires of apprehension. Each return home was fraught with the expectation of seeing the figure, but the yard remained stubbornly empty. Yet the feeling persisted, an invisible pressure, the certainty of unseen eyes dwelling just beyond the pines. One evening, the television's drone was abruptly pierced by the sound. Footsteps overhead, louder this time, more determined, resonating through the house's structure. Flashlight clutched tight, heart hammering. Arthur mounted the stairs again, each tread deliberate, agonizingly slow. The upper landing was deserted, the beam revealing only familiar emptiness. But then, a new sound, a faint, rhythmic tap-tap-tapping, originating from his bedroom window. A wave of cold washed over him. He turned, drawn unwillingly down the hall. The tapping persisted, soft yet insistent, a summons. At the bedroom door, he hesitated, drew a ragged breath, then yanked the curtain aside. He was there, pressed impossibly close, mere inches separating his face from the glass. Eyes wide, stark and unblinking, locked onto Arthur's. A strangled gasp escaped Arthur as he staggered backward, his pulse frantic, his mind reeling from the sheer proximity, the violation. The figure remained perfectly still, a pale, expressionless mask against the night, staring, just staring. Primal terror propelled him. Out of the room, stumbling down the stairs, bursting through the front door into the cold night air. He didn't cease running until he reached the sanctuary of his car, fumbling with shaking hands for the keys. The engine roared to life, and he drove, directionless, propelled solely by the desperate need for distance. A nondescript motel offered temporary refuge. A night spent wide-eyed, staring at the textured ceiling, every creak and groan from the neighboring rooms a potential threat. Days bled into one another before he could muster the courage to return. The house stood silent, undisturbed, precisely as he had fled it. Yet the oppressive sense of being watched, of something unseen lurking just beyond the panes, remained, an indelible stain. Who the watcher was, what spectral purpose drove him, Arthur couldn't fathom. But each night, curtains are drawn tight, locks meticulously verified. He waits in the stifling quiet, burdened by the certainty that the silent stare will, inevitably, return. A cloying sweetness bloomed on my tongue, alien in the morning coffee, and dread coiled instantly in my gut. Too late. The world began to tilt, edges blurring, my limbs turning to leaden weights. Through the swimming haze, I saw the cabin proprietor's face, Silas. That benevolent smile, the one that had welcomed us, fractured, reforming into something cold and predatory. Our woodland idol, the escape we craved, had just warped into a trap. It began, as these things often do, with innocent aspiration. My wife Clara, our children Lily and Noah, and I, we'd dreamt of this escape for months. The cabin, discovered online, promised rustic seclusion deep within emerald woods, leagues from any town. Images whispered of timbered walls and hearths aglow, a sanctuary from the city's relentless thrum. Perfection, we thought, for reconnection, for stillness. Silas met us upon arrival, a gaunt figure etched against the pines, beard ragged, his sharp cerulean eyes dancing with an unsettling energy, even as they crinkled in greeting. "Welcome to Whispering Creek," his voice, deceptively mellow, resonated with false warmth. "Trust you'll find peace here." The cabin itself surpassed the photographs. A tangible charm filled the air. Lily and Noah, alight with discovery, vanished inside, their joyous cries echoing off the wooden beams. While Clara began the ritual of unpacking, I exchanged pleasantries with Silas. Trails aplenty, he offered, a vague wave encompassing the dense forest that pressed in on all sides. Lakes not far, good for a dip, maybe catch supper. Yet, as he spoke, his gaze skittered, never resting, flitting like a trapped bird. An eccentricity, I reasoned. Surely solitude sculpted strange habits. That first day unfolded like a sun-drenched promise. We navigated winding paths, plunged into the lake's bracing clarity, and watched dusk settle around a sputtering campfire, marshmallows browning over flames. Beneath a canopy pricked with starlight, serenaded by the forest's nocturnal choir, a profound calm settled over me. This, I felt, was restoration. The illusion shattered with the dawn. Rising before the others, drawn by the need for coffee, I padded into the kitchen to find Silas already seated at the table, an unexpected sentinel in the quiet house. "Ah," I started, surprised. "Didn't expect you." A smile touched his lips, but left his eyes cold. "Just checking all's well. Whipped up some breakfast for you folks." A flicker of unease. This felt intrusive, a violation of the solitude we'd sought, but politeness warred with instinct. "That's generous, Silas, but unnecessary." "Nonsense," he cut in smoothly, sliding a steaming mug across the table towards me. "My pleasure. Drink." I lifted the mug, the familiar dark scent filling my nostrils. Then the first sip, that wrong note, the sweetness that didn't belong. "Did you sweeten this?" I managed, the question hesitant. Silas's smile stretched wider, tauter. "Just a touch of local nectar, my own blend." The room began a slow, nauseating revolution. My hand clamped onto the table's edge for purchase. What did you put in this?" The words slurred, my tongue thick, unresponsive. Silas loomed above me, that fixed, unnerving grin, the last image imprinted on my mind before consciousness fractured, plunging me into blackness. How long I remained adrift, I cannot say. Awareness returned sluggishly, surfacing to a pounding skull and a mouth tasting of dust and decay. Cold stone pressed against my cheek, my eyes strained against the gloom, gradually resolving shapes in what seemed a cellar. Dank air heavy with the scent of earth and mildew, the persistent drip of unseen water echoing somewhere nearby. Panic, cold and sharp, surged as memory returned. The cabin, Silas, the poisoned coffee, Clara, the children. I strained to rise, muscles unresponsive, discovering my wrists tightly bound behind me. Clara, my voice was a ragged croak. Lily, Noah. They won't hear you. The voice emerged from the oppressive shadows, Silas's voice making me flinch violently. He materialized, lantern held aloft, casting grotesque dancing shadows that distorted his features into a demonic mask. Rest easy, they're quite safe, for the moment. What is it you want? I forced the words out, battling the terror threatening to paralyze my throat. Money? Take it. A laugh, hollow and brittle, scraped the damp air. Oh, it was never about money. It's far more profound. He crouched, bringing his face level with mine, his eyes alight with a feverish, manic gleam. You see, I've dwelt here a long time, alone, just myself and these woods, and I've listened, learned things. The forest, it speaks, it tells me its needs. Ice trickled through my veins. This wasn't mere malice, it was madness. And what does it need, Silas? I asked, playing for time, fingers surreptitiously testing the coarse rope biting into my flesh. Sacrifice, he breathed, the word intimate, chilling. New life. To stir the old ones slumbering in the soil. Your family. They will help me awaken them. Sheer terror constricted my airway. He was utterly insane, and my family was in his grasp. Escape. I had to escape. This is a mistake, Silas, I said, striving for a calm I didn't feel. People know we're here. They'll look for us, the authorities. Another rasping laugh cut me short. No one comes looking, miles from anywhere, remember? The isolation you prized. He rose, pacing the confines of the cellar like a caged animal. I've done this before, many times. Lured families seeking peace, offered them to the woods. They vanish. No questions asked. My thoughts reeled. How many others? How had this monstrous charade continued? Please, I begged, dignity abandoned. Let my family go. Keep me. I'll cooperate, whatever you want. Silas paused, head cocked, appraising me. A noble gesture, he conceded thoughtfully. But the forest is particular. It craves innocence. Your children, their essence is pure. Nausea churned within me. I wrenched savagely at my bonds, ignoring the searing pain as rope fibers tore at skin. You're diseased, I spat. You won't succeed. That empty smile returned. But I already have. Your wife, your little ones. They'll be stirring soon, wondering where Papa went. Don't fret. I'll ensure their comfort until the time is right. He turned, ascending a set of shadowed stairs I hadn't noticed. A protesting groan of wood, a heavy thud, and I was swallowed by darkness and despair. Time dissolved into a cycle of frantic struggle and crushing hopelessness. My wrists were raw, weeping blood, the ropes unyielding. Every creak from the house above sent jolts of fear through me. Was it Silas returning, or worse? Just as surrender began to feel inevitable, a sound reached me. Faint scratching somewhere behind me. Rats, my mind screamed, revulsion crawling over my skin. But then, a soft whine, more determined scratching. A buster? I whispered, disbelief warring with a sudden surge of desperate hope. Our dog. Amidst the horror, I'd forgotten Buster. He'd come with us, but I hadn't seen him since that first afternoon. The scratching grew more insistent, punctuated by a muffled bark. Hope flared bright and fierce. He'd found me. Perhaps he could free me. "Here, boy," I urged softly, keeping my voice low. "Come on, Buster, good boy." The scrabble of paws on packed earth, then the welcome pressure of his warm, furry body against my back. His damp nose nudged my bound hands. Relief nearly broke me. "Good boy, Buster," I murmured, voice thick. "Chew these ropes, come on, boy, chew." It felt like an eternity, a painstaking labor of canine devotion, but slowly, fiber by fiber, Buster's teeth worked through the bindings. When the ropes finally gave way, I pulled him close, burying my face in his thick fur. "Best dog in the world," I choked out. "Now let's go get our family." The cellar door at the stair summit was ancient, its wood softened by damp. With Buster scrabbling alongside me, I managed to shoulder it open, splintering the frame. We emerged into the dim clutter of a lean-to shed adjoining the cabin. Night had fallen. The main house stood dark, silent. Peering through a grimy window pane, I saw Silas slumped in an armchair, his back to us. No sign of Clara or the children. My hand closed around a heavy pipe wrench lying on a workbench, a poor weapon, but something. Heart pounding against my ribs, I eased open the connecting door and slipped into the main house, Buster a shadow at my heels. The next moments unfolded in a blur of adrenaline and instinct. As I moved to confront Silas, Buster shot past me, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Silas jerked around, surprise widening his eyes. Before he could rise, Buster launched himself, teeth finding purchase in the man's arm. In the ensuing chaos, Silas's pained cry, the dog's ferocious snarls, the crash of an overturned lamp, I lunged, leveraging the element of surprise and desperation to subdue him, binding him securely with a length of electrical cord. Later, the arriving officers would find the remnants of his special nectar in his pocket, alongside a journal filled with incoherent ramblings about blood rites and forest gods. I found Clara and the children huddled together in a locked upstairs bedroom, dazed and frightened, but mercifully unharmed. As the reality of our ordeal sunk in, Clara wept, clutching Lily and Noah tightly. They were safe. That was the only truth that mattered. While the distant wail of sirens grew closer, we'd used Silas's old landline. I sat on the porch steps, Buster's head resting heavy in my lap, his breathing steady beside me. The surrounding woods, so recently a symbol of peace, now felt charged with a watchful ancient menace. Yet, for the first time since that tainted coffee touched my lips, the knot of fear began to loosen. We had faced the monster hiding in the heart of tranquility, and we had survived. Stroking Buster's loyal head, listening to the sound of approaching help, I made a silent promise. Our next family holiday would involve crowded beaches, chlorinated pools, and absolutely no secluded cabins. And Buster? He'd be there too, undoubtedly enjoying a large, well-earned steak. Every hero deserves his reward. Acquiring that looking glass was folly. The thought echoes relentlessly in this room, punctuated only by the tremor in my hands as I commit this account to paper. A draped sheet now obscures the wall where it hung, a pathetic shroud over my mistake. Perhaps these words will find purchase in some future mind. Perhaps belief is not too much to ask. It began 3 weeks past. Adrift on Eldridge Avenue before some tedious dental obligation, my idle steps led me past a storefront previously invisible to my notice. It wasn't curated elegance that arrested my gaze, but a curated chaos. Strata of dust-furred furnishings, brass lamps canted askew, and amidst the jumble, the mirror. Oval, perhaps 4 feet in height, its frame a somber, unadorned wood. Yet it possessed an unsettling magnetism. Was it the improbable price scrawled on a faded tag? $75. Or the uncanny fidelity with which it captured the mundane streetscape behind me, lending it an almost hyper-real clarity. A hesitant chime announced my entry, swallowed by the profound quiet within. The air hung thick, scented with decaying paper and the ghost of polish. Motes danced in the weak shafts of sunlight, piercing the grimy panes. Is anyone here? My voice felt absorbed by the clutter. Precarious towers of yellowed periodicals, skeletal chairs. Reaching the mirror, I traced the subtle filigree I'd missed from the pavement. Intricate carvings of ivy twining along the dark wood. The glass, impossibly pristine for its presumed age, offered a flawless reflection. He materialized beside me without a sound, startling a gasp from my throat. Ancient, draped in a drab woolen cardigan, his pale eyes swam, magnified behind thick lenses. An exquisite example, is it not? His voice an attenuated thread of sound. German work, latter part of the 19th century. The price? I inquired, though the tag remained visible. $75, he confirmed, a faint smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. A pittance, truly. Logic screamed caution. Why so cheap? Why the subtle urgency? But visions of it adorning my Spartan apartment eclipsed reason. The transaction was swift. He swaddled it in coarse brown paper, assisted me to my vehicle. I departed without knowing his name, the shop fading behind me like a half-remembered dream. For a week, normalcy reigned. Mounted opposite the sofa in my living room, the mirror lent a certain gravitas to the otherwise unremarkable space. Passing glimpses became routine, a fleeting confirmation of self en route to the office, a tired acknowledgement upon return, utterly mundane. Then the anomalies began, subtleties at first. Ensconced on the sofa one evening, screen flickering, a flicker within the reflection, snagged my peripheral vision. A direct look revealed only myself, the familiar room stretching emptily behind. Yet avert my gaze, and it returned. An amorphous flutter, a suggestion of passage just beyond the edge of sight. Illusions, I reasoned, capricious plays of light and shadow. But the intrusions persisted, growing bolder. One morning, wrestling with my necktie before its surface, I froze. Reflected behind my own shoulder stood another presence. I whirled, heart hammering, nearly unbalancing myself. The room stood vacant. Turning back to the glass, the reflection was solitary once more. But the image lingered, seared into my mind. A figure, perhaps female, shrouded in indeterminate darkness, observing me with unnerving stillness. A quiet dread took root. I began charting new courses through my own apartment, circumnavigating the living room, eyes fixed firmly on the floorboards when passage was unavoidable. Yet the compulsion to look, to verify, often overcame me. Each stolen glance yielded sharper terrors. The dark-clad woman materialized most frequently, sometimes static, other times gliding through the reflected space, her spectral fingers tracing contours of furniture that, in my reality, held only air. Once, horrifyingly, her head swiveled and her gaze met mine, twin voids in a pallid mask. Others joined her spectral theater, a gaunt man in archaic evening wear, a small child clutching an indistinct object. They existed solely within the mirror's plane, phantoms revealed only in solitude. The morning after witnessing the child specter, resolve hardened into action. Enough. Armed with tools, I confronted the mirror, intent on exorcising it from my wall. The mounting screws resisted, fused solid. Straining, sweat beading, the screwdriver head skipped, gouging my palm. A crimson bead welled, then fell, splattering onto the glass. And in that instant, a tableau flashed within the reflection. All of them assembled behind me, their collective gaze fixed upon my dripping wound. Panic spurred me back towards Eldridge Avenue, clutching the faded receipt. Perhaps the old proprietor held answers, but the shop, it was gone. In its place stood a bustling cafe, fragrant with roasted beans. The barista, a young woman with weary eyes, confirmed its tenure. Years, she said. An antique store? Never, not on this block, not in the 5 years she'd worked there. My frantic online searches yielded nothing matching my memory. Hours spent tracing and retracing streets proved equally fruitless. The shop, the old man, they had dissolved into improbability. That night, the haunting bled beyond the visual. From the living room emanated sounds that defied the building's usual groans. Distinct footfalls, multiple patterns pacing the floorboards just beyond my bedroom door. A low susurrus began, whispers too faint to decipher but undeniably present. Paralyzed in bed, I listened as the steps approached, halted outside my room. Then, slowly, agonizingly, the doorknob began to rotate. I clamped my eyes shut, a silent scream trapped in my throat. Dawn broke, banishing the nocturnal terrors. Or so I thought. Entering the living room, a glance towards the mirror stopped my breath. It reflected the space, yes, but transformed. The furniture belonged to another era, ornate and unfamiliar. Thronging the room were figures in antiquated finery, men in stiff collars, women in elaborate gowns, engaged in some spectral soiree. Muted laughter, unheard conversations played out. A woman with upswept hair raised a delicate glass, as if in toast. Then, with chilling synchronicity, one by one, their heads turned. Their eyes found mine, and their faces dissolved. Flesh sloughed away like wet parchment, revealing vacant sockets, grinning maxillae. The elegant room decayed around them, plaster crumbling, shadows consuming the light, until only skeletal visages leered back from the encroaching dark. I fled my apartment, wandering the city streets for hours, a desperate prayer for sanity on my lips. Upon my return that evening, the mirror offered only my own strained reflection against the familiar backdrop. Yet the respite felt hollow. Their presence lingered, an unseen weight. I attempted concealment, draping a heavy sheet over the glass. It offered temporary peace, soon violated by the sight of indistinct forms shifting beneath the fabric. The sheet itself refused to stay put, slumping to the floor regardless of how securely I fastened it. Last night, the mirror revealed its most terrifying capability, gazing into its depths. Not past echoes, but future portents unfolded. I saw myself rise, dress, commute, the banal rhythm of a workday morning. Then the scene shifted. myself stepping off the curb near my office building, the sudden bloom of headlights from a vehicle ignoring the signal, the sickening trajectory of my own body flung through the air. It showed me my imminent, violent end. This chronicle exists because of that vision. The glass doesn't merely reflect history, it refracts destiny. And that particular future I refused to embrace. I feigned illness, remained barricaded within these walls. The prophesied hour of my demise ticked past uneventfully. Relief, however, remains elusive, because the mirror now projects a different horror. The spectral assembly has returned, yet they are no longer passive observers. Their translucent fingers point urgently, insistently at the space directly behind my seated form. A physical turn reveals nothing but empty air, but the reflection shows it, an amorphous darkness coalescing, drawing nearer with each terrified glance I steal at the glass. It refuses release. Hammers glance off. Crowbars find no purchase. Attempts to shatter the glass itself are thwarted by sudden slips, inexplicable interruptions. The mirror actively resists destruction. That shadowed shape in the glass now looms inches away. An icy pressure manifests at the nape of my neck, though my frantic hand finds only empty air. I scribe these words with desperate haste, sensing the dwindling grains of time. The mirror shows me thus, hunched over this paper, pen flying, but mirrored behind me stands the truth, a presence extending appendages that mock the shape of human hands. Heed this, avoid the allure of relics found in shops that fade like mist. Distrust glass that reveals more than reality warrants. Above all, avert your gaze from that which gazes back from the other side. I can write no more. The reflection shows the culmination. The darkness envelops my mirrored self, and its countenance, dear God, its face,